Welcome, welcome, welcome to this space made sacred for over the last 114 years by people just like you, Auckland Unitarians, seeking freedom of thought, a closer connection to each other and the world we live in, and a more loving way of being. All are welcome here that come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. My opening words are by Matthew Johnson. For 5,000 years or more than 15,000 generations, human beings have been invoking spiritual power. My predecessors and yours have gathered together to make sense of their lives and their place in the cosmos. And they have spoken aloud and invited what they conceived as sacred and powerful to be with them. They called upon the spirits of air and earth, fire and water. They called for the bear and deer. They asked for the raven to protect them. They pleaded for the heroes of old to slay the monsters of their fears. They sang songs they learned from their grandparents and moved in the appointed ways, or in ways that were new but felt like the right thing to do. And they imputed power to these spirits and to the memories of those heroes. They called them gods, and they were invoked: Vishnu and Kali, Elohim, Odin, and 100 million others. Every group of people everywhere. They gathered to make sense of their lives and to make sense of their place in the cosmos, and they called these spirits to be present to them. And so do we. So do we. We gathered this morning to make sense of ourselves and this universe in which we live as best we are able. And we call ourselves to worship together. And we invoke the power and wonder of life itself, that to which all those spirits of animals and memories of heroes pointed the way. We invoke that power, which is, we know, always around, always with us, but which we sometimes forget about. We forget that we are part of the whole of creation. We forget that we are stardust. We forget that we are capable of miracles, first among them that we can love. We forget these things, so we invoke the power of existence so that we can remember, so we can lift our eyes and open our ears to the true and beautiful. For 5,000 years or more, we have done this. In many tongues, in many ways, we have done this. And so we continue that ancient tradition in our way and in our time. And so let us now worship together. To answer the question posed by the title, can a Unitarian go to heaven? I decided to ask Google, and I got some interesting responses. All no. No, Unitarians don't like gated communities. No, everyone in heaven is in agreement. Thinking it was hell, Unitarians wouldn't go in. No, a dead Unitarian is all dressed up, but with no place to go. No, on the road to the afterlife, there is a fork in the road. The left path has a sign to heaven, and the right has a sign to a discussion about heaven. Without pausing, the Unitarians always turn right. And my personal favorite, no, old Unitarians choose not to go to heaven. Instead, they try to die on the second Thursday of the month because that's when the recycling goes out. The next one might have been intended as a joke, but it actually is to the point. No, Unitarians believe in life before death. I probably live in a bubble. But I can't think of anyone I know who believes in a literal heaven or hell for that matter. At least not as places we go in the afterlife. Certainly the Hubble telescope hasn't found the pearly gates yet. But that doesn't keep us from telling jokes about heaven. I think telling them is our way of keeping deeper, more disturbing existential questions at bay. We find making jokes preferable to reflecting on our certain death and wondering about our meaning and purpose in this life. Jack Spong, in his personal reflection on the afterlife, suggests that the human need to believe in God and in such ultimate matters as life beyond death must be greater than the human ability to believe these things. When people get to the point where they do not really believe what they are saying, they still seem to believe in believing what they are saying. If so, joking about heaven may be our rational mind's way of hanging on to the unbelievable to avoid death's reality. But in my line of work, it's hard to avoid dealing with death and questions about the afterlife. I can remember one particularly difficult year when I did over 50 funerals. Twice that year, I did 3 in one day after already leading 3 Sunday services. I felt like the angel of death, and that's no joke. It is the role of the ordained to be death interpreter in teaching, in pastoral care, in dealing with the diagnosis that announces someone's impending demise, in grief management, in exploring death inconsistencies like why the good die young, in planning funeral services, and in preaching on those occasions. I suspect that I am not the only minister who has kidded himself that he can deal with death while still hiding from it in the sanctuary of carefully crafted pious words and nuanced traditional beliefs. I was called out from hiding 15 years ago when the doctors confessed that my cancer had defeated them and that I had 12 to 18 months left. That I'm still here suggests that there really is life after death. For the 6 months following the pronouncement of my death sentence, until I was told the experimental treatments had put my cancer in remission, I got a crash course in being alive, truly and fully alive. Believing I would not see it again made the maple trees deep red autumnal leaves set against a deep blue sky in my front yard, not just incredibly beautiful, but an invitation to be grateful to be alive, to appreciate it. Before death came knocking, I suspect I was blind to its transitory beauty, seeing only the leaves I would soon have to rake. During those 6 months, I devoted myself to putting my affairs in order. But that was not just about updating my will. It was about finding wholeness, shalom, peace. I might not be able to be cured, but I could still be healed. That time made me better at living in the moment. It clarified priorities. Things that seemed so very important before the diagnosis were revealed as inconsequential. Things I had previously seen as something I could put off until I was less busy came to the front of the queue. That's what happens when we are no longer certain the sun will rise tomorrow. Relationships and simple pleasures become life's treasures. By this point in my life, I'd pretty much discarded all belief in any kind of afterlife. Certainly of any kind where I had self-consciousness and personal identity, where I'd be reunited with lost loved ones. I did wistfully fantasize that my beloved dogs that had predeceased me might greet me. Unitarians might not be in heaven, but surely dogs go to heaven. So there wasn't much reflection on my part about what was next in life's journey. It was more about the now and what my life had been all about. It was a time for searching for meaning and purpose. Where I came out was that my life was an accident. In fact, all life is an accident. We have not yet solved the mystery of how life first began on this inert third rock from the sun, but eventually single-celled plants came into being and produced oxygen, giving the necessary ingredient for future life to evolve. About 65 million years ago, a major accident involving the Earth's collision with a comet thought to be about the size of Mars changed conditions here dramatically. It ended the age of reptiles and enabled the rise of mammals. No one planned it. It just happened. But if it hadn't happened, our earliest known mammalian ancestor, a furry mouse-like creature that inhabited the grasslands of what is now East Africa, might not have come into being. Looking at it then, it would have been difficult to imagine us as its direct descendants. Evolution is just a series of unplanned accidents. No intelligent design required. The facts make clear that we are accidental tourists passing through this life. On an individual level, we are also accidental creatures. Chance was working at the moment of our conception. We are each the result of a chance connection of one living thing, a spermatozoa, and another living thing, a single, somewhat fragile egg. There was no hope for ongoing life for either until they connected. No divine force determined which of the millions of our father's sperm found our mother's egg. It was chance. According to the laws of nature, all living things are products of chance. However, in that chance encounter, much of our identity was set. Our sex was determined. We had no choice in the matter. Our body shape, potential height, our IQ, the color of our skin, our eyes, and our hair were decided by genetic code that did not ask for our input. That code was also set a biological clock ticking within us, starting our relentless march towards death. Thus, death needs to be seen and understood as a natural part of the cycle of life. It is a given, not an abnormality. It is not an enemy to be defeated or overcome. It is only because humans evolved to be self-conscious creatures that we even hear the clock ticking and are left wondering when it will wind down and finally stop. But our genetic code is not the only chance factor that determines who we are. We did not choose our birth family. We had no choice in determining our birth order or whether we were loved and cherished or abused or abandoned. We did not choose its values, tastes, educational achievements, religious views, economic status, nationality, our well-being during our time in utero, or even the diseases to which we might be genetically predisposed. It was all chance. While we might eventually exploit, overcome, or succumb to these chance factors, they will always be part of our origins, beginning with conception. At some point in our development, we begin to have a say about who we are. But our origin will always color our choices, decisions, relationships, vocation, beliefs, and attitudes. So if life in general and our own individual lives are a matter of chance, that leaves little room for a supreme deity who is spending time rolling the dice for each of us. little room for a God prepared to intervene to save us from our circumstances, to make decisions for us, or to direct our lives, or decide where we are going in the afterlife. 15 years ago, during my heightened awareness of my mortality, I had an epiphany. There is no meaning and purpose to life unless we create it. We are the creators, not some supernatural being. And create it we must. It is essential to living life fully, if not to survival itself. If you have ever had times in your life when you have lost sight of your meaning and purpose, or been prevented from living it by outside forces, or if circumstances have changed, making it redundant, you know how destructive that is. It's hell. Having meaning and purpose is heaven on earth. But creating it is not a once and for all undertaking. It is an ongoing process. Raising our children can give us meaning and purpose, but they eventually leave the nest. Our work can provide meaning and purpose, but jobs become obsolete or are moved overseas, or eventually we have to retire. Being a good spouse can give us meaning and purpose, but marriages end or spouses die. Our capacity to keep creating meaning and purpose comes from the divine within us. But if there is an external God, I have a nomination. I hope it is comedian George Burns. You may not remember or know of him. He died 20 years ago this year, shortly after turning 100. He was still working. If you do remember him, it may be because he played God in a trilogy of movies with John Denver. But it is not that movie role that makes him my preferred deity. It was his capacity to keep recreating himself. It was also his good advice to preachers. The secret to a good sermon is to have a good beginning and a good ending, then have the two as close together as possible. In 1903, when he was 7, he and 3 of his pals started busking. He says, we put out a hat and began singing. Sometimes people put money in. Sometimes they took it out. Sometimes they took the hat. This led him to a career in vaudeville that lasted until radio and the movies killed it. He and his wife, Gracie, who was also a vaudeville entertainer, made the transition. They made movies together and had their own radio program. When television made its appearance, they made their transition to the small screen with a hit program based on their radio show. When Gracie retired due to heart problems, George threw himself into writing and producing TV programs and films. He was the producer of Mr. Ed, by the way. And Alan Young, who started it, just died at 96. He also continued to perform in films, making his last appearance at the age of 98. When he wasn't in a film or producing one, he was on the road doing stand-up comedy in nightclubs. He once observed, I don't believe in dying. It's been done. I'm working on a new exit. Besides, I can't die now. I'm booked. George Burns was a gifted entertainer, but more importantly, he was a master at finding a reason to get out of bed in the morning. In fact, he advocated not staying in bed unless you could make money in bed. He spent much of his life in heaven. The death of Gracie and of his best friend Jack Benny hit him hard, but the entertainer in him knew the show must go on. People need to laugh. When you are in one of those transitions, when life feels like hell, when you aren't sure where to find your meaning and purpose, remember, you are a Unitarian. Our purpose is about making heaven on earth. That is how a Unitarian gets to heaven. In a prayer attributed to St. Francis, we are told how. It is in giving that we receive. It is in loving that we are loved. It is in forgiving that we are forgiven. And ultimately, it is in dying that we live. Francis is reminding us to find meaning and purpose in our kind and generous and loving relationship with others. When our focus is not solely on ourselves, heaven's gates open to us. There we can enjoy life's simple pleasures together. You've probably heard this familiar story, but it's worth telling again because it makes the point. A man is given a tour of heaven and hell. They begin at hell, where he sees hundreds of hungry people in a room full of banquet tables. The banquet tables are filled with delicious food, with amazing aromas, and all the people have spoons. The spoons, though, have long handles, just too long, so the people in hell cannot feed themselves. They cannot get the food into their mouths, so they are eternally tortured by their hunger in a room full of delicious food. The man on the tour asks about heaven. The tour guide says that heaven is much more pleasant. The room looks a lot like this one, but everyone there is very happy at their banquet. The man asks, in heaven, do they have shorter spoons? The tour guide says, no, the spoons are the same, and the food is the same. But in heaven, they feed each other. I want to offer this meditation by John Pavlitz. On the day I die, a lot will happen. A lot will change. The world will be busy. On the day I die, all the important appointments I made will be left unattended. The many plans I had yet to complete will remain forever undone. The calendar that rules so many of my days will now be irrelevant to me. All the material things I so chased and guarded and treasured will be left in the hands of others to care for or to discard. The words of my critics, which so burden me, will cease to sting or capture anymore. They will be unable to touch me. The arguments I believed I'd won here will not serve me or bring me any satisfaction or solace. All my noisy incoming notifications and texts and calls will go unanswered. Their great urgency will be quieted. My many nagging regrets will be resigned to the past, where they should have always been anyway. Where superficial worry about my body that I ever labored over, about my waistline or hairline or frown lines, will fade away. My carefully crafted image, the one I worked so hard to shape for others here, will be left to them to complete anyway. The sterling reputation I once struggled so greatly to maintain will be of little concern for me anymore. All the small and large anxieties that stole sleep from me each night will be rendered powerless. The deep and towering mysteries about life and death that so consume my mind will finally be clarified in a way that could never be before while I lived. These things will certainly all be true on the day that I die. Yet, for as much as will happen on that day, one more thing that will happen. On the day I die, the few people who really know and truly love me will grieve deeply. They will feel a void. They will feel cheated. They will not feel ready. They will feel as though a part of them has died as well. And on that day, more than anything in the world, they will want more time with me. I know this from those I love and grieve over. And so knowing this, while I am still alive, I'll try to remember that my time with them is finite and fleeting and so very precious. And I'll do my best not to waste a second of it. I'll try not to squander a priceless moment, worried about all the other things that will happen on the day I die. Because many of those things are either not my concern or beyond my control. Friends, those other things have an insidious way of keeping you from living, even as you live, vying for your attention, competing for your affections. They rob you of the joy of this unrepeatable, uncontainable, ever-evaporating now with those who love you and want only to share it with you. Don't miss the chance to dance with them while you can. It's easy to waste so much daylight in the days before you die. Don't let your life be stolen every day by all that you've been led to believe matters. Because on the day you die, the fact is that much of it simply won't. Yes, you and I will die one day. But before that day comes, let us live.